Hi, everyone. Welcome to our lunchtime webinar. We're going to give people just a moment to get in to the webinar and then we will get started. We also have interpretation services available in Spanish. So if you need that, you can click on the interpretation button.
Buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos, entonces vamos al webinar, vamos a empezar en unos cuantos minutos. Tenemos disponibilidad de interpretación en español. Busque usted la figura del mundo en la parte inferior de la página y ahí pueden encontrar la opción de español.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to give everyone just one more minute and then I will do introductions and we will get started with our webinar. Thank you for being here. All right, Levi, are you ready if I introduce you? Okay, we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time and then as more people join us. So today for our prevention services webinar, we have Levi Arithson. Levi is the program manager of the LGBTQ plus equity team here at DPS, proudly sitting on the SALT team, Culture, Equity, and Leadership team. He is greatly influenced by students and leaders for equity surrounding him. So please welcome Levi Arithson for this presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for having me again this year. Prevention Services, like Megan said, I'm Levi Arithson. My pronouns are he or they. I'm a transgender, genderqueer, queer human being. I'm a former DPS teacher and classroom teacher, and I have been in this role for about 3 years. So I'm really excited to be with you all today to give this talk and to share this draft segment of a documentary that DPS has been working on in collaboration with a Queer Endeavor. And so if you don't know, Queer Endeavor is housed in the CU Boulder School of Ed. And they're aiming towards creating schools that are safer and more affirming for LGBTQ plus and gender expansive youth. A Queer Endeavor seeks partnerships with educators and school communities to make workable the silence that has historically surrounded topics of gender and sexual diversity in education. Also just want to take a minute and thank Root Ed for generously funding this film. Root Ed is a local education partner that believes deeply in equity for all students at all schools. So before we kind of jump into viewing the film, I first just want to make a quick note on the word queer. You might be sitting in this call and saying, well, I thought that was a slur. Isn't that offensive? So queer is a word that has been reclaimed by a lot of members of the LGBTQ plus community. It has been taken from a word of denigration and humiliation to a word of empowerment. Now, that being said, that is not true for all members of the LGBTQ plus community. Some people do still find this word to be offensive. This is the word that our students use. It's the word that we're using. So just want to let you all know. So let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, if I can change my slide. Before we get into viewing Queer Joy, I just wanted to give a little bit of background. So like I said, I've been in this position for about 3 years. I do LGBTQ plus professional development all around our district, and something that keeps coming back to me and coming up to me, you know, in my work and in my vision of this work is I really wanted to create more student-centered professional development, right? I think if we're not listening to our students' voices, if we're not rooting in their stories, we're missing most of the picture, right? And so this is something I've been kind of kicking around for the whole time I've been in this role. And then I do quite a bit of work with a queer endeavor. I've done work with them for a really long time. About 10 years ago, they made a documentary similar to this one called Breaking the Silence that they have been using for a tool of professional development all across the country. And as we were talking, they also expressed interest in creating a new film. The film they were using was 10 years old, and it was time to ask what's next, what's happening now. And so it was just kind of like the perfect moment for our two organizations to come together. Producing a film like this is a very, very big lift. And so we've been working together to produce and create this film. And so as you can see, this is a picture of most of our amazing DPS students who participated in the film. So we were able to connect with 16 students across 17 different schools here in DPS, all different kinds of schools, charter, innovation, and traditional. And their narratives and what was important to them formed the segments and the stories of this film. And queer joy was something they talked about a lot. Just to be clear, this is one of 4 segments that we're developing that will be turned into professional development for DPS, but also across the country. So just so you know, we are also crafting a couple of segments, 3 more segments, one on intersectionality and the importance of coalitions, one about gender, and then the last one is about kind of teaching and learning curriculum and kind of the climate of school. And so, yeah, that's maybe what you need to know about this. When we play the film, just a couple things to note. This is incomplete. This is a draft. So please keep that in mind. There's no music yet. There are no closed captions yet. Some of the audio isn't completely fixed, so it's a little bit bumpy. And the gist of it and the main narrative is there and ready to go. So I'm really excited. So when I was thinking about this talk this year, I was thinking about, well, why queer joy, right? It is a challenging time to be an LGBTQ plus person in this country. The social and political climate is challenging, if not scary. But then, as I was developing this talk for today, I was listening to this podcast, the At Liberty podcast, which is the ACLU podcast, and they had Chase Strangio on. He's an attorney for the ACLU. And this is something that I pulled out that I thought really grounded us today. And I'll read it in case you aren't reading it wherever you are. And he's speaking about a lot of the cases that are happening right now, a lot of the laws that are being passed banning gender affirming healthcare. And so that's the context of this quote. But he says, the state in these cases is arguing that one of the reasons why the state has an interest in banning this care and focusing in particular on young people is that because being a trans adult is a bad outcome, that they want to intervene early in preventing this horrible, depressing future of trans adulthood. That is really, in essence, what they're arguing, which is, the state should step in because this is something that can be prevented and should be prevented. And so we really wanted a counter narrative to say that we are trans adults and our existence is in direct contravention of what you're saying. We have full lives, we have beautiful families, we have communities that love us. We have all of the things that you claim that we don't. And what I really got out of this is there's a lot happening right now. But maybe there's nothing scarier than an LGBTQ plus person who is thriving that LGBTQ plus youth can look to. And so it felt important to really highlight queer joy. And like I said, our students that we worked with in creating this film, this was something they really talked about and was something that was so important to them, that people see their wholeness, right? And so I just kind of wanted to ground in this quote. I thought it was really powerful for today. And it kind of counteracts the narrative of the horrid LGBTQ plus life, where the LGBTQ plus person as predator or as groomer, as outside of society, right? And we know, right, people have been saying this for a really long time and they're saying it now. And so it felt really important to highlight queer joy too. And it's a both and, right? So talking about queer joy is not meant to minimize the danger and the fear and the hate that is happening to LGBTQ plus communities right now. And so definitely want to make clear that this film is not meant to disregard any of that. These are some statistics. The GLSEN National School Safety Survey came out, I think it came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is from the most recent survey, and it's a survey done all across the United States. And, as you can see from these statistics, that LGBTQ plus students still face challenges in school. And as a result of those challenges, down here at the bottom, you can see that students are more likely to have missed school, right, or had lower GPAs than their peers who did not experience this kind of discrimination. And so we still have a lot of work to do. What's happening is impacting our students, all of our students, right? And in a particular way, impacting our LGBTQ plus students. So even though Colorado and Denver Public Schools have really strong protections for LGBTQ plus people and LGBTQ plus students, it doesn't mean our students are immune, right? They see the news, they are on social media. And I think that, in DPS, sometimes there's an assumption that we don't have a lot of pushback. I'm sure we have less than some, but we do have some, and I think it can feel really challenging to our students. So before we get into the film, this is the first time a public audience has seen this, so it's going to be exciting. And I just want to pose a few questions, right? So how does this film inform your support of students, LGBTQ plus students? What might you try or lean into? And then what further wonderings do you have? So we are going to stop the recording and thank you. Recording in progress. Okay, where am I going now? To see all my slides that I put in here and didn't use. And so that's kind of what I have for you all. And now we can open up to questions, thoughts, feedback. I know I didn't really speak to kind of like policy, DPS policy and practices, which I'm happy to address. Also, if there are questions about that. So I think I'm gonna stop talking. Megan, am I supposed to stop talking now?
Levi, you can do whatever you please. I'm trying to get my camera back on. And through all of that, I realized at the beginning, I didn't properly introduce myself because I was so excited to introduce you, Levi. But for those of you who don't know me on the call, I'm Megan Michio. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a school health professional at Thomas Jefferson High School. There we go. And 2 days a week on the prevention training team. And that was the first time for me seeing the cut of that video. And thanks, Levi, for editing a shot of me in the audience there.
Yeah, thanks for being there.
So excited for this. Yeah, let me jump in. We do have some questions in the Q&A. So I will start with the first one. There was a question in here. I'm hoping to learn more about what schools and their districts are doing / required to ensure LGBTQ plus students are doing to ensure inclusive learning and supported. My child is gender fluid, non-binary, and is having some challenges with bathroom accessibility. I will be advocating for them with their school, which has been supportive in general, but I want to understand what expectations school have from the district and what they are required around accommodating youth bathrooms, for example.
Sure. So as folks may or may not know, in January of 2020, hang on one second, excuse me, DPS passed our all gender restroom mandate, which mandated that every school needs to have at least one single stall all gender restroom. So that is the expectation that there is access. There is at least one point of access for a student to use a single stall all gender restroom. Colorado's public access laws, public accommodations laws also include the protection of gender identity, gender expression, and transgender status. This may or may not apply to this child, to your student, but students have a right to use the restroom of the gender they consistently identify with at school. And so students who are trans should be able to use the restroom of the gender they consistently identify with at school, or they should be able to use a single stall restroom. So I will say, without going into great detail, the working through of making sure that all the schools have the single stall restroom is kind of, it's been stopped up a little bit by COVID, right? Because schools were closed. And then there's kind of 3 different types of schools or types of restrooms that we're looking at within the schools. You would think it would be really easy to take down one sign and put up another sign. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that. And so we are working through those layers. Some of our schools don't have a single stall restroom already because some of the schools are older. And those are kind of the toughest schools for us to work with because, installing a bathroom is very, very, very expensive. Other than that, most schools should have some sort of single stall access. In terms of other access and protections, LGBTQ plus students are protected by DPS's anti-discrimination policy, which is policy AC, and again, also protected by Colorado's public access laws. In terms of curriculum and instruction, we encourage diversity in our curriculum. We do not require parental consent to learn about issues of equity. We don't require parental consent if someone's going to read a story with 2 moms in it, right? And so we are working towards creating more inclusive classrooms. Different people are in different spaces, and there's mindset shifts, there's policy work, there's connecting with students. And so there's kind of all these different pieces, and not everything is moving, I think, at the same speed. But I think DPS is very responsive, and whoever this parent is, you're welcome to reach out to me directly, and I will work with you to ensure your student is getting what they need.
Thank you, Levi. Okay, so this question, I know part of it was answered because you put your contact on the screen. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
But this person has asked, or I think just also looking for an opportunity. I work with the HIV STI prevention and outreach team at the Public Health Institute at Denver Health. Love this and wondering if there's opportunities for our team to outreach more with youths and high schools.
That is not a question I know the answer to. I know that places with clinics, schools with clinics have spaces to outreach. But I think just depending on the kind of outreach that you want to do, I would connect with whoever is your Denver Health contact in DPS, and they can probably help you out with that.
Yeah, because we do have, since our schools are partnered with Denver Health school-based clinics, that might be a place to start because we also have health educators in those roles. So that might be a great place to start. Okay, another question. Can you give us ideas about how to be an ally as an adult to trans youth?
Yeah, I can. I think, kind of the baseline is to use their self-asserted name and their pronouns. That can be a really uplifting measure for trans youth. If you make a mistake, that's okay. Just correct yourself and move on. I think that, believing young people, right? I think sometimes there's kind of a narrative of, well, young people don't know who they are, or you're too young to know. And I think that, we all go through journeys in our life, and it's not to say that people's journeys don't shift and change. But I think that we need to respect young people as autonomous beings, right, with their own sense of self, and to support them no matter where they are in their journey, right? And that doesn't mean, right, that you can't ask any questions or have any curiosity or wonderings. I love curiosity and wondering. But just making sure you're being mindful and respectful and seeking out resources other than your young person. And I think if you're a parent on this call, if you have a student in transition, there can be a grief process, right? You thought one thing was going to happen, then now something else is happening, right? And so it's not bad or wrong to have your own process, but I would encourage you to speak to a therapist, check out a PFLAG meeting. I think Transgender Center of the Rockies does support meetings for folks. And so have your process, just try not to have it on your student. And then the other thing, just like these students are saying, like, celebrate their passions and their joys, right? We don't need to look at trans youth or LGBTQ plus youth as always kind of on this brink of chaos, right? Find out what they're into, learn about them, encourage them, and we can talk about LGBTQ plus people and trans people as powerful people, right? Not just people who have experienced this oppression, who are experiencing this extremely challenging time in the world right now. But trans people are powerful and they've done a lot. And so really working with your young person to, you know, highlight the strength and the beauty. And I would say the most important thing is to love them and believe them. I guess that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Levi. Another question we got, what are steps that we can take if our child is in a school that is not supportive?
Sure. If they're a DPS school, you should reach out to me and we will support that school in making sure that they are meeting the expectations for making sure that every student thrives. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can, you know, ask for and talk about wanting LGBTQ plus inclusion at your school, right? Use your voice as a parent, right? We have some, you know, there are different things happening with parents right now, right? And sometimes there are kind of these loud parent voices that don't necessarily speak for the whole community, but you as a supportive and inclusive parent, like you have that voice too, right? And so I think sometimes there's pushback about this. And, you know, for every one pushback, there's like 100 parents that are like, awesome, let's talk about this. I want my child to like grow up in like a sensitive and accepting world. We don't always hear about that because things are going well for you. It's great to hear when things are going well or to ask for what you want, right? And depending on how the school responds to it, you know, I'm happy to loop in, I'm happy to provide resources. You know, I think sometimes people are not supportive, and that's true. Here in DPS, we have an expectation about what that support means. Sometimes people just don't know, right? They aren't sure. And I think sometimes in this work, like people are afraid of making mistakes. And I think that fear causes them to like freeze. And so I think really like supporting with like resources, you know, and suggestions can just be really helpful because I think, you know, our school leaders are people too, and they don't know everything. I don't know everything. So just being like a part of your school community, I think can be really helpful.
Awesome, thank you. A question we got, how do we watch the full film?
Well, how do we watch the full film? If you're a DPS employee, you will be able to do professional development around this film. I think the films will be done, I think in February. We'll have some kind of premiere event. I don't know what that looks like yet. And then the professional development that will go with the films will start to roll in the fall. And so we'll have all new PD for LGBTQ plus topics in DPS. Queer Endeavor will also be out there doing PDs with the same films. They aren't really going to be available for, you know, just public viewing because they're a professional development tool. So that's what they're meant for. Is that wrong? I don't know if that's wrong to say, but.
No, I think that's
Okay.
great. Let me just double check if there's any more questions in the Q&A. Okay, I think we got those there. Levi, is there anything else that you think is beneficial for anyone to know? Thank you for putting your contact information. I think some people might be reaching out to you.
That I think is beneficial for people to know.
Yeah, any last minute pieces of
I know,
wisdom?
we're finished 20 minutes early. It's wild. You know, you don't have to have an LGBTQ plus student or be LGBTQ plus to ask for this work in your schools, to ask what schools are doing to make sure that folks are supporting all students, right? Like if you're a cisgender heterosexual person, you know, you can introduce using your pronouns. You can put your pronouns on your email signature. It seems like a little thing, but it's actually a really big thing. Make sure your home is inclusive and welcoming, right? And I think I said this last year, like your home might be the safest place for one of your kids' friends, right? If you have a young child, you can read books with different families, gender diverse families. You can ask your schools, like, what's in your library, right? And we kind of see this happening in the opposite direction right now. But you can ask too, right? And you can say, inclusion diversity is important to me, and I want to see all kinds of families, right? Who gets to say, and I think just in general, keep questioning what counts as normal. According to who, what power do we gain from that? And I had something else, but it fell out of the back of my brain. I think, yeah, listening to young people. And I think especially with this particular segment, LGBTQ plus students are more than their pain. And we have to, and this includes me, we have to keep undoing our bias around these students, right? Of course, things are challenging. Of course, things are hard. But our students are creative and beautiful and intelligent and do all sorts of things and are all sorts of different kinds of people. So really just continuing to undo kind of this damage center narrative around LGBTQ plus students. That's all I got. That's all I got. If anyone else has any questions.
I think that's great. That gives a lot of great information, and I think some ideas, especially if there's parents on the call, some good questions that they can ask their schools and what their schools are doing. So I think that's really helpful. Also, just for the attendees, we put in the chat a feedback form. So if you could take a second to fill that out, that would be really helpful for us. Just knowing what you thought about the webinar, also what future topics you would like to see. All of our webinars we post on our DPS prevention website, so you can view past webinars that we have. And then let me just check if there's any other announcements we need to put in.
Whoops, can I add something to?
Yeah.
Just if you have questions about LGBTQ plus supports and policies, if something happens and you unfortunately need to file a DPR, if you have an LGBTQ plus student who's being discriminated against, this is, I don't know, can people see this if I put this in here? Oh, I don't know if I can. I'm just going to do it and see what happens. This is our district LGBTQ plus toolkit. It's a Google Doc, but this has like every policy and practice, law, board resolution, anything you could imagine. So if you need that, bookmark it and use it, I guess. Is that good?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Helpful. I have that link bookmarked in my school, so I can share out with my school. Yeah, and then I think again, just if there's any, we can stay on for a moment. If there's any last minute questions, again, I put the Google, I think I directly sent it to Levi. I'm gonna put that Google form back in the chat. That just is the feedback form. If you all could fill that out, that would be helpful. And we'll hang around for a second if there's any last minute questions. Thank you, Levi. Oh, you're muted.
See, you would think that I would like know how to do this now, but I just don't.
It's okay.
I know. It's been a long 3 years.
Sure has. Thanks for, that was so great to see that snippet of the film.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be kind of